All right, welcome to this Easter video. I'm so glad you decided to take a watch. As I said in the previous one, none of this is going to make sense if you haven't watched the other two, because we're coming to the tail end of this story, but this one kind of fits a little bit better, so if you haven't watched the other ones, it's not going to be that much of a deal, because this is Easter, and so we're going to kind of be looking at that main story as well. But this one be Broken Death. And we're going to spend some time looking at the tail end of the story that we had already been discussing. We talked about communion in one of the other videos and hope and all of that in the other one. So take some time, kind of go back and watch those at some point. They'll kind of really fit the 3 video series that we've been doing this weekend. So this one came out on Easter 2017, and so we're going to spend some time looking at the rest of Luke 24. So to continue our story with where we left off, verse 32, they said to each other, "Didn't our hearts burn within us as he talked with us on the road and explained the scriptures to us?" And within the hour, they were on their way back to Jerusalem. They found the 11 disciples and the others who had gathered with them, who said, "The Lord has really risen. He appeared to Peter." We see that he appeared to Peter. Yes. It was exciting, but they were still kind of, how did they get to that place though? And so now we're going to kind of go back to the beginning of the story. As I said, we kind of told the end first. So everybody's kind of now celebrating the fact that he has risen. But what happened first? Verse 1 of chapter 24, "But very early on Sunday morning, the women went to the tomb, taking the spices they had prepared. They found the stone had been rolled away from the entrance. And so they went in, but they didn't find the body of the Lord Jesus. As they stood there puzzled, 2 men suddenly appeared to them, clothed in dazzling robes. The women were terrified and bowed with their faces to the ground. Then the men asked them, 'Why are you looking among the dead for someone who is alive? He isn't here. He has risen from the dead. Remember what he told you back in Galilee? That the Son of Man must be betrayed into the hands of sinful men and be crucified, and then would rise again on the 3rd day?' They remembered that he had said this. So they rushed back from the tomb to tell the 11 disciples and everyone else what had happened. It was Mary Magdalene, Joanna, Mary the mother of James, and several other women who told the apostles what had happened. But the story sounded like nonsense to the men, so they did not believe it. However, Peter jumped up and ran to the tomb to look. Stooping down, he peered in and saw the empty linen wrappings. Then he went home again, wondering what had happened." So we see this story unfold. And so now Easter morning, they're experiencing what Jesus had said. Peter, the guy that was with Jesus, right? And now all of a sudden, it happened, and now they're kind of like, As it said in verse 4, it said, "And the women stood puzzled." Kind of like, what? And then they were like, the angel was like, "Remember, he said that he was going to do that?" "Oh, yeah." And then the disciples, "Nah, these women are crazy. They're speaking nonsense. They've had too much coffee," or whatever. And they didn't want to believe them. But Peter, it said that Peter did the same thing. Peter went there, saw what had happened, and went home and wondered about it. So it was kind of like they experienced, just like the people on the road to Emmaus, kind of like they had experienced something so great, and yet it was so puzzling, and they wondered what had happened. And they couldn't figure it out, and they didn't know what was going on. And they walked all that 7 miles, and then they found out, and then they ran back the other 7 miles. To the people saying he had risen, to the celebration that should have been a long time ago. And a lot of the times, sometimes we can miss out on celebratory moments because we're focused on what had happened. They were stuck in Friday, and it was Sunday. They were stuck back here about everything that had happened and all of the humdrum and he died on the cross and now he's dead and what are we going to do? And it was Sunday, and they were still, what are we going to do? What had happened? They spent 2 days wondering about this. They spent Easter, instead of celebrating, they spent Easter, what happened? Wow, what are we going to do? But something interesting also was said when we read verse 32. It said, "Didn't our hearts burn within us?" And it's kind of like, when Jesus was speaking, and a lot of the times Jesus will speak like that and your heart will skip a beat, or you'll get goosebumps the size of goose eggs, and all of a sudden you don't know where that feeling's coming from. And that's what they had, because they kind of were veiled, they kind of were stuck in the brokenness of things, and they kind of were stuck there. But their heart still felt it. And a lot of the times we're the same way. We can hear good news, we can hear what's being said, but we don't really want to believe it. We can't believe that something like this could really happen. They wondered about it, and they thought about it, and they were puzzled about it. And at the same times we are too. We're puzzled about it, we're broken down and beat up about the way life has been treating us, and we don't know what's going on. We can't believe with the things that we've done that something like this could ever happen for us. But it's true. And it does, and it did. And they finally kind of cleared the cobwebs, and they realized that, and they were able the next day to celebrate Easter with everybody else that should have been celebrating when they were upset. And a lot of the times we're that way too. We just can't believe something like this. And so when Jesus was telling them about it, and just like when we hear stuff, Jesus was telling them, just like Jesus can talk to us through anything, through a video screen, through a pastor talking on the stage. He can talk to us and something will be said and we can feel it in our hearts, even though we may not be like conscious of what's going on. We just kind of can feel this. And they weren't really realizing that Jesus was talking to them, right? They were right there, but Jesus was talking. And they didn't see that, but they felt it. And a lot of the times, myself included, and any pastor that really talks, they're talking under the impression Jesus is giving what to say. So Jesus is kind of talking through us, just like he talked through many people in the New Testament. He talked through Paul and all of these different people that wrote some of the books of the New Testament. God talked through the prophets of the Old Testament. And that's how people heard from God and heard from Jesus. And all of these things happened on one road, and in the context of the road, they didn't understand. And a lot of the times we can be the same way. We can hear the same things. And all we're hearing is all of the noise and the traffic and all of that. And we can't hear what God's really saying to us. But then all of a sudden something kind of like settles in and we feel it. And we can know that God has said something. And just like these people, when the angels said, "Hey, why are you looking here among the dead things? You're not going to find a person that's living here." And a lot of the times we kind of do the same thing. We kind of like chase down these dead things, and we're supposed to be looking for life, and we looking for life in all of these things that don't really ever provide life. And they were supposed to be looking for Jesus, and Jesus started appearing to people and started making himself known. And the disciples didn't even believe him at first. And Thomas, the same way that they were, he was recognized kind of like, now I had to see it first. Have you ever been told a story by somebody and you kind of like, guess you kind of had to be there? They say, because they can tell in your face kind of like, no, I got to see it to believe it. That's just too outrageous. That's kind of what Thomas was like. We talked briefly about him before, and until he saw the same thing that Cleopas and his companion saw. When he saw the nail marks in Jesus' hands, he was kind of like, "Oh, Jesus!" It took him seeing. And Jesus actually tells him, it's good that you see me and believe, but it's better to believe and not see me. So that's kind of how the story ends and how it began. And this whole day of wonder and awe is what we celebrate today. And the fact that he is risen and he is alive. And he's making all things new, and everything about this is true. And this story is in Luke 24 and many in the other Gospels as well. But look for Jesus when he's there. When he talks, he's talking to us. And we can feel it. And we know that what he's saying is true. Because everything in this book, some of it hasn't come true, but the stuff that we read about that has, it's truth. And he has risen. And that's what today is about, that we can celebrate that. So let's kind of get out of those things and just celebrate the fact that Jesus is risen, and whatever is going through, he's got it. He's in control. He hasn't changed. He's still sitting there. He is king and ruler, and he has risen.